Okay, welcome to the second installment of the Food Forest Design class. In the first class, we talked about doing a site assessment. So by now you should know your directions and where you've got sun, where you've got shade. Now let's get into planting your biggest trees. If you don't plant your biggest trees now because you don't have them yet, you're going to get them at a later time or whatever, you can at least put some flags in the ground where you decide you're going to end up planting them. Like there's an example right there, a flag. Okay, so basically what we're talking about now is where your biggest trees will be placed, whether or not you plant them right now, the next thing you do or not. It really depends on actually several things, which I'll get into. But placement of your biggest trees is what we're talking about here. And you want to put them where they're going to get some sun. Food-bearing plants, it takes a lot of energy to create a fruit. A fruit is loaded with sugar. That's a high energy molecule. So it takes a lot of solar energy to produce that. It takes a lot less solar energy to produce green leaves, something like this, and it takes a lot more energy to produce fruit. This is why a lot of your leafy green plants can grow and produce in fairly shady areas, but fruit-bearing trees, they're going to need a lot of sun. Okay, so find out where your sunniest areas are. Next thing you want to do is look at the fruit trees you want to plant, and I'm going to go through a list of the ones that work well in North and Central Florida. And then for each of those, look at the size and make sure you've got enough room in that location for the ultimate size of that tree. I think the best way for me to explain this is to just go through my trees here, because I've got pretty much all the bigger trees, close to all of them. I've got 80 or 90% of all the bigger trees that you're gonna have a lot of success with in North and Central Florida. So let's just go through with them one by one, and I'll explain my criteria for where I decided to plant mine. You'll have to take a look at your site and adjust accordingly, depending on exactly what you're working with. So let's start with the trees that you value the most. My favorite fruit tree to grow in this area is the Japanese persimmon. I want to plant my Japanese persimmons pretty close to my back door of my house. So there's my back porch, right? So as I come right out, the first thing I want to see out here is some Japanese persimmons. These are my favorite trees. And there's one, a Saijo, one of my favorite cultivars. There's another one. And I actually have two more right here close to the back of the house. And then I've got a few more. So I planted them close because I can water these more often, and I can keep my eye on what's going on with them a lot easier than I could if it was planted way back there in the back. I just don't, these trees that are up close, I can just look out my window and see them, whereas I can't really tell what's going on with trees way in the back. So if your highest value trees pretty close to your back door. Another reason to have them pretty close is if your site, the back of your house faces south, then you want to put any semi-tropical or tropical plants also real close to the back side of your house. And some of those are trees. So for example, probably my second favorite tree, which is avocado. There's a winter Mexican avocado there, and a Brogdon avocado over here. Now you'll notice this Brogdon avocado is planted very close to this Saijo persimmon, and all the books will tell you that that's a big no-no, that these trees are planted too close together. But where we're at, it might freeze and it might kill this avocado. I mean, chances are if you wait long enough, sooner or later there's going to be such a hard freeze, it's probably going to kill it. It might not happen for 10 or 20 years, but sooner or later, long term, unless global warming really picks up pace, which would be probably pretty bad. But so what I've done here is I've created a little insurance policy, if you will. Now your persimmons are temperate trees. It doesn't matter how cold it gets. It's not going to hurt them. They're used to getting cold and going dormant, and indeed they actually need some chill hours in order to make some fruit. That's the temperature between, or the time that it's between 32 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. That's called a chill hour. Anyway, but this is another reason why you might want to plant on the south side of your house, is because you want to plant tropical trees like an avocado. These happen to be cold tolerant and get down to the low 20s before they're damaged. So that's Brogdon here and Winter Mexican over there. These trees are going to get big and fill up this space up here, and they're going to cast a shadow towards the north, which is right towards my back porch. And that's what I want. I want shade. I want to be able to sit on my back porch, even on a hot, sunny summer day, and feel relatively cool and comfortable back there because it's shady. So that's a consideration. Let's move on over here and look at some of these other trees. Right here, I've decided to plant a plum tree. That's what this is. It's a low chill hour plum. So why in this spot? Well, if I look towards the east, that's the east right there. So the sun's going to come up over there in the east. That means it's going to get a lot of morning sun right here in this location. In the middle of the summer, when the sun's the most intense, that's when the sun's the highest in the sky. So even that time of year, if I go straight up from here and look straight up into the sky, it looks like these trees would shade it, but basically I'm pointing straight up. So that early morning sun coming up, almost till noon, we're gonna have full sun on this spot here. After that, we're gonna have afternoon shade, because I've got a big oak tree, canopy tree right there. But that gives me a good 6 hours, 5-6 hours of intense sunlight. Can't really see the plum tree because of the background there. Here it is. So it gives me plenty of sunlight for a plum tree. Right here, I've got a couple of elderberry trees. Let's look at this spot. So the sun will come up over there in the east. Sky, nothing but sky. It gets overhead. It's just going to be really sunny still. A little bit of shade starting to come in, but as the sun sets over there in the west, sunny. So in other words, what that tells you is this spot right here for these elderberries, really sunny. Now the elderberries love a lot of sun. I decided to plant my elderberries right here because the other thing that elderberries like is more water than what most trees need. They're water hungry trees. And this is a spot on my property where there's sort of a natural bowl. So it's a wetter location, a little bit wetter location. I'm not gonna say wetter, it's really just moister. There's a little bit more soil moisture that lasts longer in this spot. So it's a good spot for a water thirsty tree like an elderberry. So that was my thinking there. Let's keep moving along. This is a native Florida red mulberry tree. And again, it's wide open sky all the way above it. Early in the morning, there's going to be some shade cast by this fence right here, but the rest of the day, very sunny, and that's what mulberries like, lots of sun. So that's a good spot for the mulberry. Let's keep moving along. That's another Japanese persimmon tree. That's a fuyu. And again, it's very, very, if you look up, it's just very sunny all day long. Lots of sun there for that. So what is just to the south of this persimmon tree? I don't want to plant anything that's tall enough that it's going to shade this persimmon tree. Well, so what I've planted right here is a blueberry, and that's a bush. It's just a shrub. It's not going to get tall enough to shade the persimmon. These elderberries get a little bit taller than the blueberry, but they're not real tall, and they're also separated from this. So in other words, you just got to make sure your plants are going to get the sunlight that they need. and you got to space them accordingly. And if you have a tallest plant and then a medium height plant and then a small plant, you want the tallest plant furthest to the north, medium height then closer towards the south, and the shortest plant even further towards the south. That way, with the sun being up there in that southern sky, it's going to be able to light up all three of those plants. If you did that in the opposite order, it would not work unless the smaller plants were actually shade-loving plants, and some are. It wouldn't work because the smaller plants would be in the shade of the taller plants. And again, if that's what the plant needs, then you plant accordingly, and you make sure your shade-loving plants do get shaded by other plants. So here's some peach trees. These are fairly small trees. They don't get really tall. I've planted them over here in this open spot, and there's nothing really tall towards the south in front of them that would shade them, so they're going to get the sun they need. Let's just keep moving along. Again, right up here against the south side of my house here, there's plenty of light in the sky all day long. You know, and in the wintertime, the sun is lower in the sky over there towards the south. But that's not the growing season. So yeah, during the wintertime and the cooler months, there's going to be more shade cast by this big oak tree into this area right here. This is not the growing season anyway, so it's actually not all that important. As you can see, the persimmons are dormant right now. They're not even growing. Now in the summer though, the sun's going to be much higher up in the sky up there instead of down there. So in the summer it's up there. There's not going to be any shade cast on this persimmon, and it's going to be during the growing season, so it'll do much better. And here's another persimmon right here. Same thing applies. Let's keep moving along here. Look at some of the other locations where we put things. Okay, here it's a little bit further towards the south, and this loquat gets to be a pretty big tree. So eventually this thing's going to get so tall that it's going to cast a little bit of shade back this way. So I'm recognizing that years from now, a few years from now, the shade of this loquat may begin impacting at least the lower parts of these trees. But by then, these two trees, the avocado and the persimmon, well, they'll be up high. So they're gonna outgrow that shade or stay ahead of it and reach up into the sky and get the sun they need. They won't be shaded out. If this was a big full-grown loquat right here, and I tried to plant these little short trees right here just to the north side of it, they're going to be in the shade from the get-go. They're not going to really have a chance to grow and get up into the sun. You got to think about that. Here's another loquat tree. So you can tell I really value shade because these loquat trees get big. And let me just step back and show. I want a lot of shade being cast towards the backside of my house. Okay, so there's that loquat, and there's that other one. And I have other trees in here as well. This is not a cold tolerant avocado, so I don't expect it to last long term. But right down in there, there's an American persimmon. That'll be one of the tallest trees I have. It's dormant now, all the leaves are gone, so it's hard to see. But that American persimmon will be a very large tree in this area as well. So all these trees eventually are gonna join up with this big live oak, and I'll have lots of big trees all in this zone right here. And they will all be casting shade right towards here, towards the south side of my house and my back porch. And that's what I want. I want it to be shady and cool and comfortable back here. Now some of these trees are temporary. Okay, the papaya tree is not going to be here for very long. It might not even make it through this winter. If it gets cold enough, that'll be the end of it. Same for these other tropical trees like the chaya here, and the moringas. These are tropical. You can plant tropical trees. They'll help build your soil in North and Central Florida, especially in North Florida. You know, they may not last that long. They may freeze. Um, but it doesn't hurt to give them a try, especially if you can get your hands on some without it costing you too much. And a lot of times you can do that, trading and swapping with other gardeners and stuff. Go ahead and try your tropicals. See if they can, see if you might have sort of a warm microclimate where they can grow and last. And if they don't, well, you learn something about your microclimate. The other thing too about all that is eventually when all these other bigger trees get bigger, they're going to create a warmer microclimate right in this spot underneath them. So if these tropicals don't make it through this winter, a few years from now, I could try planting some more tropicals in here, and there may be enough of a nice insulating cover above them up here in the sky, you know, that I'll have a nice warm microclimate for them and they'll do fine. So you got to think about the sun, and when it comes to the tropicals, you got to think about whether or not they can make it through the cold. Let's keep moving along out here and look at placement of some of these other plants. That's another loquat that's going to become a really big tree. But I don't have anything behind it that I'm worried about it shading out. So here's the loquat. Now I'm looking from the loquat towards the north. The only thing that I'll shade out basically right here is going to be my greenhouse, and that's okay. I don't mind that. So I've planted some Mysore raspberries here. They need a lot of sun. So is there anything towards the south side of them that could block the light? No, not really. There's a small plum tree here. Plums don't get that tall. It's not going to throw a whole lot of shade. I've got some thornless blackberries right here. Okay, they don't get very tall. They're not going to throw a lot of shade. Out here in the open, I've got a nice mulberry tree. They need a lot of sun. This mulberry tree gets pretty good sun all through the middle part of the day, from about 9 or 10 a.m. to about 3 p.m. And that's outstanding. That's great sun for any kind of a fruit-bearing tree. Same thing goes for these figs out here. Fig trees like a lot of sun, and they need a lot of sun to produce nice fruit. And there's nothing that's going to block their light. You know, these trees off in the east here, they're just going to be blocking the morning sun. Once the sun gets about past them right about there, that's 9 or 10 o'clock. And so from then on, it's going to move this across the sky. That's where the sun goes. And then very late in the day, they're going to start to see some shade, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So they're getting full sun during the middle part of the day when it's the most intense. They'll get all the sun they need. And I don't have any sort of a tree immediately to the south side that's going to shade them. Now, a few feet away here, I do have a jujube tree. It's going to take many years before this tree grows big enough to shade out these figs to the point where it impacts their production. Okay, so you got to look at that. You got to look at how big your trees get, how big the plants get. And figs, by the way, don't get very tall. You don't want them to get tall. You want to prune them because they fruit on the new growth. So you got to look at how tall does your plant get, how wide does it get for your spacing. And then the other thing I would say is you want to overplant. Assume you're going to have some losses. You know, if a tree doesn't make it and you don't find that out until 3 or 4 years later, and you didn't overplant, when that tree doesn't make it, now you've got a big blank space in your food forest, and you're starting from scratch. The lesson I've learned over the years is to overplant, and you know, worst case scenario, and you need to take a tree out because they're crowding each other out, you know, take out the one that's not very productive, the least productive, or your least favorite, whatever it is. I just found that I've never had to do that. Overplant, and one thing or another usually happens, and you'll be glad you overplanted, because even after things happen and plants don't do well, you're still going to have a nice lush food forest. Here's a spot where you're going to see a lot of morning shade on this loquat, but then the rest of the day, let me get over here and position myself. So now I'm on the north side of this loquat and I'm looking south. So towards the south, those trees are too far away to shade anything. The sun's way up there in the sky in the middle part of the day if you're looking towards the south. So yeah, there's going to be a little bit of morning shade here, but middle part of the day, the whole rest of the day until very late in the day. Sun's almost setting by the time it casts shade on this loquat. These are the things you want to think about. Now, I highly recommend you try to get all of your trees planted as soon as possible. They take the longest to get up to the proper size that you need for a good food forest. So you want to get them started early if you can. You can follow up later with your shrubs and your herbs and ground covers. Not that you can't plant those simultaneously, but just get your trees in the ground early. Here's another red mulberry, Florida native red mulberry. So all the species that I've mentioned are very good for Central and North Florida. Let's mention a few more. I've learned by trial and error which trees grow well here, trouble-free. You don't have to worry about them. You don't have to deal with them. Pests don't bother them. Diseases don't bother them. Here's another one. It's the Dunstan chestnut. And this one is especially good for North Florida. In Central Florida, where I'm at, you may or may not get enough chill hours for these to produce fruit. This is a jujube. Jujubes are very drought tolerant. Excellent trees for Central and North Florida. They perform very well for us. Let's keep going and I'll just make sure I'm covering all the good ones. That's another jujube. And over here is another Dunstan chestnut. We've mentioned the mulberries. There's a great mulberry that gets shade all morning. So this tree, it's interesting to me. This tree has grown faster than any other of my mulberries, even though it's in the shade the most. So let me get over here. And even in the middle of the day, this thing's really in the shade. So it's not until late in the day. There's the sun late in the day, and then the rest of the day it's going down like that. So it's got good direct sunlight late in the day, all day long for this beautiful little mulberry tree. My other mulberries are more in the direct sun longer, and yet this one's grown faster. And that's probably a function of you know, it was so hot, and there were times when it was very, very dry this past summer. Our rainy season was quite intermittent this past year. So there were times where I couldn't get back here and water, and that one probably benefited from being in the shade. So it had better soil moisture than the ones out in the sunlight that I couldn't get to and water enough. So that's another thing you got to think about. The sunnier it is, the hotter it is, the more water it's going to take. And you got to think about, you know, your schedule, how much time do you have to spend in the garden, and can you keep an eye on watering things properly. But the most important thing at this point, you know, is you've picked a place, you want to have a food forest there, so get started. Get some plants in the ground and then put mulch on them. Okay, just get them in the ground and start mulching them. These examples, every one of these you can see has a little pile of mulch around them, right? These figs, by the way, figs really do best with a lot of mulch. That's why I have this huge mulch circle here. What I've done here is I've just planted a wax myrtle, which is a nitrogen fixing native Florida shrub, right in the middle of this fig circle. I've never seen anybody else do this. This is just something I thought would be kind of neat and fun to do. And so I'll be able to chop and drop this wax myrtle and lay those clippings on the ground there, those cuttings, and pull this back out, and mulch these figs with it, and then maybe they'll be able to pick up some nitrogen from the soil that the wax myrtle has been depositing in the root zone there. So I hope this is helpful. In the next series, there'll probably be other aspects about these trees and where to plant them that I'll bring up, but this is good for now. Just start planting. Get things in the ground. Make sure they're going to get enough sun. Get them mulched real good. Make sure you're watering them. Okay, so yeah, that reminds me. There is one more really important thing here, and that's timing. You know, during the growing season, I would say starting in April. In other words, once you're past the danger of the last frost has passed, you're not going to get any frost again until at least November probably. You can plant anything at that point. Just beware that it's the hottest and driest time of the year, so it's going to require the most watering. And young plants right out of the pot, they need the most water. As time goes by, they get their roots more established. You don't have to water them as much. So it's ideal if you just start planting your plants when the rainy season starts in June, or for your temperate plants. So temperate plants being, you know, the mulberries, the jujubes, the chestnuts, even the loquats. Loquats are almost semi-tropical, but they're temperate really. And Japanese persimmons. These are your temperate plants. You can get those in the ground in the fall. That's the best time of year. That way they've got all that time until April to get their roots established before they have to take on the hot, dry part of April and May. On the tropicals, on the other hand, though, you want to plant those in the spring because you don't want to plant them right before it's getting ready to have a freeze and hurt them. So timing is totally dependent on whether or not they're susceptible to damage from freezing. Okay, so don't plant anything that's going to be damaged by freezing right before it's going to freeze, or late in the summer when we really don't have enough time to get established. On the other hand, your temperate plants, they don't care about freezing. In fact, they need some chill hours to be able to make fruit. So plant them in the ground, yes, late in the season. So that's the timing. Get your tropicals in after the last frost, and get your temperate plants in ideally in the fall after it's not so hot anymore, because heat is a lot of stress on plants, and it requires you to water a lot more too. So timing. Okay, that's it for this installment. Thanks a lot, and we'll continue this with the next one, and we'll start moving into the planting of some of the other plants, the shrubs and the herbs and so forth. All right, y'all, take care now.